I'm ready.
Are you ready?
I mean, I'm ready when you are.
Okay, it should be live.
Great. Well, if we're live, that means I can say hello to our million of adoring fan listening.
Yeah, you can.
I deliberately didn't pluralize those words.
We just think our one fan is a million to us.
That one fan, our one fan, the one watching now might just be, I don't know, does the account, because I'm in as our normal, as the YouTube account, I don't know if I count as a view
I don't know.
or
I
if,
don't know how it counts views.
because it's interesting because there was, oh, what was it? It was either Bandcamp or SoundCloud because I do some music stuff and you playing your own stuff doesn't count. So
Oh, okay.
that's, that's always nice. Right. I'll get this going. There we go. Yeah, it's working. Rightio. So, man, what a time to be alive, Jake.
It is, yeah.
How cool is it that there is nothing going on in the world right now, that life is just completely normal, you know?
It's completely normal,
I
easy,
I haven't had to change my
straightforward.
routine at all. I don't know what everyone's complaining about not being able to go outside. You know, I'm here and I'm like, well, you know, I don't see the difference.
What's funny is that's actually truer than it should be.
I mean, actually, yes. I went outside often often enough. So but yeah, it's funny. Like neighbors I've never talked to, all of a sudden ran into someone in the hallway and keeping our sensible social distance, had a conversation. It's like
Wow.
normally we would not acknowledge each other's existence, but obviously things are so bad. So we're like, another human being? How are you? Oh, you know, I'm getting by. Oh, okay, yeah, well, yeah. So it's interesting, just the change in vibe. I wonder if as soon as this is all over and done with, by the way, putting a lot of effort into not referring to what's going on so we don't get the fancy Google like, oh, do you want to know more about this thing? Because we're not purporting to be experts on said global events. But once it's all said and done, will this keep up or will we just go back to normal where we're just like, I
No,
don't acknowledge your existence?
we'll go back to normal. Played music isn't under the same copyrights.
It was just in reference to
You playing your own
going and
music.
listening to your own music.
Hmm.
Funnily enough, because I haven't linked my personal account to my music on Spotify. You can, but Spotify for artists involves proving you've got social media and all of this stuff, and I don't, so I can't link the two together.
You can't prove you are you, but someone else could probably prove that they
Yeah,
are you.
that's a little bit of a pain. But if I like, but so at the moment, Spotify don't know the two are linked, so I do earn money for listening to my own music. So
Nice.
fun times.
That's something. It
Yeah.
is also
Also,
8 o'clock, so should we start doing
yes, we
something?
if at the end of this, do hang around because we've got a little bit of I
Channel
suppose
update.
it's channel update. That's the way to say yes for
I'm
our.
down with all the YouTuber lingo.
I was going to say announcement. How like 1945. Right. Let's get started.
Coming
Anyway,
at you with an important announcement. So, hang on, let me just change my scene thing there. Okay.
also apologies for the sound of my washing machine on spin cycle in the background.
Oh, I can't hear it.
Uh, yeah, new microphone that might do a better job of like rejecting weird sounds. Anyway,
You know I'm with it. I'm always
get
down with the kids.
get us started, Jake. Show us what's what.
So this week we are looking at, if I can bring up my, yeah, this is just going to happen, isn't it?
It is what it is.
So we are looking at the Vulnhub box called CK3. It was released this week, so we figured it's probably not got too many write-ups out there and will be a fun thing to just look at. The description for it also said that there's many different different paths, which means it can always be fun to find something new, learn something new.
We found a couple of them.
We found a few of them. Hopefully we'll get through all of them that we've found and leave some hints towards other paths we think are there, but we just weren't able to actually explore or
To be
didn't have the
clear
time
as
or
well,
effort.
we say 100% this one is Jake. I literally, maybe except for one thing where I don't know where you ended up getting to, I tried to provide some input. This week is 100% Jake's hard work. So, well, I mean, I say hard work, but anyway.
Fair enough. I'll take that. So, yeah, so this box, unlike the Pinky's Palace ones, I remember when we spin them up, it sort of tells us an IP address and a few other things to help us. In this one's case, it just says find it for yourself. So they're not giving us any.
At this point, this is where I would cheat and go and look at my the dashboard for my modem and go, okay, yep, there it is. DHCP logs, yep.
Fair enough. Well, instead of doing that, what we're going to do is nmap ping sweep. So if we look at our if config, because I'm running two VMs, I had to also change the VM by default comes in host only mode. So I guess it assumes that you're running it as the VM on your attacking machine. Whereas because we run two VMs, I had to change them both to NAT so that they could see each other. You can see my IP address is this. So our network range is going to be the 232.0. And a quick ping sweep, we could write our own in Bash or Python or anything, but Nmap has a ping sweep as well, which is the S capital P, and then you just type in the range that you want to scan.
Well, handy thing, I had to write one in. So where I am at the moment, they've got a bunch of appliances that they don't know what they do or what's running on them. So I wrote a ping sweep and then a port scanner in PowerShell. So
this is somewhat prepared. Hey, this one's very prepared. I even have a write-up.
Yeah.
In the description of the video is a link to the write-up for this.
I gave Jake the credit, okay? So, he's done the work.
And so we can see how quick this is, right? So in 1.7 seconds, it scanned all of those addresses and came back with a bunch of them. The low level or low number ones are sort of the VMware routery ones, if you like. 132 we know is us. 254, I don't even know what that is. I think it's another VMware
That's
dedicated one.
Oh, no, 255 is like broadcast, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But 129 is what we want to look at. And to prove it, we're just going to run our standard nmap scan against it and hope that we get the kind of results we're expecting. Now this takes a little while longer to run because it is running a bunch of our safe scripts and enumerate version scripts and things like that. So, oh, there you go. You can see it's almost done. And we have a bunch of open ports, and they're the ports that we typically see on a capture the flag. So we know we're probably on the right track.
This is like the who's who of random services that the reality is in the wild, you see them less and less, unless you go to like corporate legacy land or random business with like a, hobby enthusiast as the IT guy. And then all of a sudden, bam, you see this.
Things like NFS definitely, I don't know if you would see out in the wild anymore. I'm sure someone still uses it. Anyway, working through the list, we can see on FTP we've got anonymous login and potentially writable full control permissions to this pub folder. So let's start there and take a look. To connect, we just do FTP. The -P is to enter passive mode. We ran into this in Pinky's Palace where we had to just run in passive mode because it had a firewall blocking outgoing connections.
So active mode, just to refresh, is where you connect to the server and the server then actively connects back to you on a high ephemeral port. So the ephemeral port range is, I think, everything over like 30,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
Then passive mode is where you connect to the server and then the server tells you, because it splits command and data, like old school. So you then connect to the server on some random high port, and that's passive mode.
Yeah.
But most FTPs
I
active.
mean, it'll probably work in active mode as well.
No. So my bad. Most FTPs passive. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, because the random inbound connections into your home network, you don't allow the ephemeral ports back, and it's
Yeah.
not a TCP level connection where the reciprocal connection's allowed back in for an outgoing, because there's a whole new connection coming back.
Yeah,
It was,
exactly.
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, both active or passive work in this case because there's no IP tables or firewall rules or anything blocking any of the ports talking back to us. And just to manually confirm what our Nmap script showed us, we've got access to this pub folder. It looks like full control if we need it. Having a look in here, we've got a log folder that we don't have full control over. And in the log folder, we've got a bunch of other folders and files. Some we do have read permissions on and others we don't. So what we're going to do is just go through and download them all.
This is a pretty standard thing you sometimes see, especially in legacy worlds or places where there isn't a good system for getting logs in front of people in a nice, friendly manner. So you end up with a network share hanging straight off the log folder so that people can just go and, in quote marks, check the logs. So, I mean, not the riskiest thing on the face of the planet, but again, it depends on what the logs contain. If they contain secrets, it's a bit more dangerous. So really, you should, in an ideal world, you're piping your logs to, I don't know, you're using like Logstash or Splunk
One
or
of those sort
something,
of log
and
aggregator
then
tools, yeah.
you can have nice authentication over there so that users have to properly authenticate. Whereas I think SMB comes with some problems from time to time.
Well, there are, so this WTMP is a login, like authentication log. The boot
Yeah.
log can also contain some interesting fingerprinting info. So it'll tell us, what the Linux kernel is, what modules it loads, what cron jobs run automatically on boot and all that kind of stuff. But it's nothing, there's nothing in there in this case that's too useful for us. The only thing we're really concerned with is this WTMP because it gives us a couple of usernames.
And to your point, Benjamin Franklin, I love that we got a regular called Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah.
Anyway, to your point, application logs especially, like I've seen passwords, OAuth tokens, PII, so addresses and stuff like that. And that stuff's not necessarily a massive problem in logs, while the auth tokens and passwords is, but PII is not. But then you have to remember that under like Australian law, anywhere where PII ends up, you have to treat like, this has private data. And all of a sudden you're like,
Yep.
so how do we properly encrypt all our Splunk data? And then the poor Splunk dude's like, that is going to, well, I mean, other than disk level encryption, right? We're talking about higher than disk level. And the poor Splunk guy's like, if that's even possible, it's going to absolutely crap all over performance. So, you want to make sure you don't have anything in your logs you don't want.
Yeah,
Web
app logs are notorious for this sort of stuff. Like if it's in the URL as a query string parameter or something like that, chances are it's in a web server log somewhere.
So when I said it wasn't an issue, I meant it is an issue that PII ends up in logging tools like Splunk and whatnot. But the consequence is more around, right, now you have to treat the entire thing like it's full of PII, and all of a sudden you're auditing who has access and what have they seen. And it's just easier to not let it end up there in the first place and make sure you've got hard controls so that debug logging isn't enabled in production like it is in non-production. Because you want debug in a non-production environment so you can figure out exactly what your change broke, but you don't want it in prod. So having environment level switches, so like pulling from Linux environment variables that are set rather than setting them that way around is often a good way to go, or separating config and code and that sort of stuff. So, a bunch of different patterns to do it, but
exactly.
Anyway,
so looking at this
back on track.
WTMP file, it's got a bunch of extra sort of garbage in there, which you can find tools to interpret this a bit better. But basically, when you look at it, you can see that it's got some events, like some login events, shutdown events, reboot events. And some of the login events are to the root user, which is something we'd expect to see on a Linux box. And there's other login events to this SMB user. So we've got at least 2 users that we can potentially target for this box.
That
Moving
was
on.
logs in an internal public network share. Creds gave significant access.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
so
not a
that
good
is a
thing.
problem. That is actually probably a bigger problem with SMB. Is it's quite easy to set up Windows file shares, and SMB. I mean, you can run it on like Linux as well, but to be public, to simplify access, or the permissions just set to any authenticated network user in the network. So if once a bad guy has credentials, it doesn't matter whose credentials they got. They could be the cleaners. Bam, they can see, file shares and stuff like that if they're set to just authenticated users.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you're setting up now
Yeah,
to.
so next on the list is, so with port 22 and SSH, we don't have any creds. We've got potentially usernames, but we don't have creds or anything. So we move on down to port 80, which is a website. The website is a super basic static HTML. I'm assuming Armor InfoSec is the dude or the company or something that made this box. I don't actually know. Shout out to them if they did.
Or it could just be a placeholder name.
It could be a placeholder name. So we take a quick look. There's nothing in the source code or anything interesting. So we use our normal dirbuster directory list. We can confirm that we're looking for HTML files because we go /index.html and we get the site back. Whereas something like index.php doesn't work. So we're just looking for some HTML text files. We'll let that run. We see it finds our index pretty quick and it keeps going. This doesn't actually find anything interesting with this directory list, but after I rooted the box, I went back to see where this website, like the website's root directory, and there is a folder on there which I'll let other people find, which basically gets us to the same point we're about to get to. So that's one of the alternate paths to user. Next on our list, we've got 111, which is RPC bind. And RPC bind is sort of a network port mapping service, I guess you call it. So you can see here that there's a list of ports and services, and this thing will let remote, so RPC is remote procedure call, and it'll let remote programs basically route them into, I guess, the internal service depending on what it's trying to talk to. It's like a port lookup port, if that makes any sense. A remote service will sort of talk to this and say, I want to talk to NFS. What port should I be talking on? And in this case, it'll say NFS is running on port 2049. Go talk to that port.
Yes. So the Linux manual or man pages refers to the RPC bind utility as a server that converts RPC program numbers into universal addresses. It must be running on the host to be able to make RPC calls on a server on that machine.
Yes.
So I guess, it's kind of a bit like a phone book where you would hit a server that you think's running something, you'd give it some information, it would go, that service is on this other port.
Yeah.
I used to know more about RPC, but off the top of my head, I can't remember much more about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's sort of my brief, high-level understanding of what it does.
It tells RPC bind the address at which it is listening. The RPC service tells RPC bind the addresses at which it is listening.
The PID,
and the RPC,
or links to the PID.
When it's the RPC program numbers, it is prepared to serve. When a client wishes to make an RPC call to a given program number, so it contacts RPC bind to determine where the rest of the request should be sent. So, like other services can do RPC, and I think this thing's like a generic. You look it up, it tells you what's there.
Yeah. So RPC itself isn't super exploitable. Like it doesn't do much other than tell you what port to go talk to instead. So there's not a lot we can do there.
Yeah.
Moving down the list, we've got 139 and 445, which are both Samba, and we've done some SMB stuff in the past. So we'll do a little bit of enumeration on our Smb shares, and to do that, we run Smb map is the name of the tool. The -H is just the host, which is our IP address. Let that run. It'll just see if it can do anything anonymously because we don't have any creds yet. And as a response, we can see that we can read and write to a share called SMB data, which is nice.
Okay, so having a look, the reason why bind is in the RPC bind name is apparently related to the bind DNS server. It's so that you only need to know what host a service might be running on, and then the client can figure out the rest by talking to RPC bind.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah.
Right. So now that we know that we've got anonymous read-write access to a file share, we can either mount it and see what we can have access to, or we can just connect to it directly in a similar way that we connected to FTP. So we're going to use RPC Client here with the -U is saying an empty username and the N is no password, which is the same way that we would connect to FTP anonymously, and then our port number.
So I guess some of the advantage of directly connecting is, rather than mounting, is depending on your base operating system you're testing from, sometimes you might leave traces that you were there if you've mounted, as it tries to go into directories and might leave things behind. So this is just a safe way to make sure you're probably not going to be leaving anything behind you don't want to,
True.
other than logs that you've logged in and are pulling files. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And now once that we're in, we get another terminal similar to the FTP. And there are a lot of different commands that we can run with this. So we're just going to focus on a couple of the interesting ones, like SRV info, which will tell us a bit of info about the server. Nothing that we sort of didn't already know from our Nmap. There's also things like enum.dom users, I think it is. Yeah. So this will tell us all of the domain users that have access to this SMB. And we've just got our SMB user that we already knew about.
In that case, it's not actually a domain user, it's a local user. But
yeah.
Trying to remember with SMB if you have to create users specific to the service or if you can just use Unix users or Linux users.
I think you can do both. So
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, there is also an enum domain, which will tell you all of the domain info if there is any. In this case, there isn't any. Once we've got a username, we can use query user. Except we need to know its user ID, not its username. So to get that, we go look up names SMB user. And this just gives us the...
It's the SID.
It's the... So there is it called SMB walk or something walk? And it'll go through this entire tree line by line and just print you the value of the tree. And it is messy, but if you know what all of these SIDs mean, that can be pretty useful. In our case,
the SIDs are just, I think they're like Windows AD, object IDs, because I think everything's got a SID.
Yeah.
In the case of this, there is no Windows AD, but because it's meant to be compatible, it uses SIDs as well. So, yeah.
And this last number here is the user ID that you'd find in your password file or domain or wherever this user comes from. So now that we've got that, we can do the query user with 1000.
It stands for security identifier. That's right.
Looking at this, nothing super interesting either. Like sometimes you might find things like if they've got a full name or if they run a script when they log on or things like that. In this case, there's not a lot there. If they've got, password resets or anything happening, if their account's locked, stuff like that. But again, nothing here. And we've just got the SMB user that we already knew about. What we haven't done is actually look at the contents of the share. So we know that we can connect. An RPC client is just this list of commands. It's not actually, this isn't the SMB client is what I'm trying to say. So before when I said that this was connecting in the same way as FTP, it's not really. It's doing an RPC connection, which is probably more related to the port 111 stuff than SMB itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be all of the Googling when I just did to remind myself what it was seemed to all refer to NFS and Windows stuff. So I think RPC's a old Windows thing. And they implemented enough of it to make SMB on Linux work because it has to be largely Windows AD compatible. So
it's
going
so
to be
that
able
you
to
can do like cross OS mounting and things like that.
Maybe all the like fancy Kerberos stuff and stuff like that as well. But yeah, it's going to have all of these functions so it can look up who users are and what permissions they have and stuff like that, so it can make these decisions. So
yeah.
Anyway,
so it's not actually a client to connect and view the data. There is a CLI to connect and read the data, and that's called Smb Client. Connecting with Smb Client, we have to escape our backslashes because it uses is it called UNC pathing or whatever it's called?
Yeah. You have to double backslash.
Yeah, so we got a double backslash to escape them. We know that the file share is called SMB data. And again, in this case, the $N is to say connect anonymously with no password.
Old Benny Franklin also mentions that he's seen instances where mounting, I'm presuming locally, requires higher permissions than directly connecting using a client like this. So, which is a good point as well. That if you got the tools to directly connect, you're not actually mounting a network drive.
Yeah,
so,
mounting can be seen as a different higher privileged
so I guess the use case here is you're on a server, but you don't have massively high privileges, but you've got a client like this that lets you start to pull stuff from other servers without actually having to mount the network drives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or laptops or whatever you've managed to get onto.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So looking at... Oh, yes.
I was going to say caveat, I'm not a Windows pen testing expert by any means.
Fair call. So looking at this, we've got what looks a lot like the folder we were just in with a few extra things. So we've got some SSH config, a to-do file, an IDRSA, which is interesting because that's what SSH private keys are typically named, and our note.txt. So we're just going to get all of them. Sshd config, get to do with 1.0
to do
IDRSA and get note.txt. Oop, that's not how you spell exit either.
Ext.
So looking through these, we'll cat the Sshd config first. There's not a lot of useful info in here other than the fact that there's no password authentication, so we have to use a key, which we think we might already have. And there's also a line in here somewhere that says that root is allowed to SSH in. I can't remember where it is.
Like allow root or something like that.
Allow root is uncommented in here somewhere. Anyway, it's in there. So we got a little bit of info about the SSH server.
Well, I
Looking
will
at
say
Yep.
as well, best practice on Linuxy sort of stuff is direct root login shouldn't be enabled, and definitely SSHing in as root shouldn't be enabled either. You should always be logging as a normal user and sudo -i or su dash dash to get to root.
Yeah, exactly.
Just provides an extra step, reduces some of the risk. Um, it's not
Exactly.
perfect, but helps.
Yeah. Next file is note.txt, which is just someone's made a little note that for security, they've removed the find command, which is something that we use a lot for local file enumeration. But they haven't deleted getcap because they don't think getcap or capsh is known to anyone. Well, it sure is known to us now. So we'll just remember that for later in case we need it. Before we
I'll also
get...
add,
Yeah.
this is fairly common in CTFs to have note files.
Yeah.
The reality is they tend to be in like emails sent between people,
Yeah,
but
that's
there
true.
probably is stuff that dumb
Email
in emails.
or like to-dos in code comments, things like that. Commit, like if there's repo, commit repo histories. The to-do has a bunch of Google Drive links, which I didn't actually try. But, okay, they don't exist.
Either they do, but there's probably been a rush of access to them. So I think Google Drive rate limits.
Yeah, they might have been blocked or broken or something. So these could potentially be another way in, but we haven't been able to test them. And finally, we get to our... Whoop, that's not the right one. Oh, tab autocomplete work. And what we've got is, in fact, a RSA private key, but it's encrypted, which is no fun. Because that means we need to know this guy's password to be able to use this key. But that's okay, because we can perform a dictionary attack against this. Typically, we'd use something like SSH to John and then throw it over to John the Ripper to run and crack and do whatever else. But if you've seen our stuff in the past, you'll know that we don't like John the Ripper. It's a pain in the ass to set up, and it doesn't always work. And I am in a new VM that doesn't have John the Ripper set up, and I couldn't be bothered doing it. So instead, I wrote a really basic Python script, which does a very similar thing using a Python library to attempt to extract the private key from this encrypted private key and just sort of loops through a word list.
Does anyone else see the irony in, like, as soon as you run PyCharm, it's like Java?
Java. Yeah. So to run this script, you'll need this async SSH, which is just a pip install, and I've also included a little link to where it came from. This library includes a function called read private key from an encrypted key, and you pass it the encrypted key file and the string that is the password. And if it fails, it'll throw an exception. It says what exception and everything if you want to actually handle this properly, but I was doing it as a quick and dirty to see if I could get it to work. And so I just sort of skip to the next line in the word list if it doesn't work. Am I in the right folder? That doesn't look like the right folder. Oh no, it is revmob. Oh, this is because this is the project from previous streams. Never mind. Python RSA decrypt.py. All you got to do is run it, and it'll run through the word list. We're just using one of the simple seclist ones to make this a bit quicker. I used RockU initially, and it took a long time. But lucky for us, the password also happens to be in this super short 110 line one, which is perfect for quick streams. And we can see in the results that it was able to decrypt this file with the password. which is just a copy of the line that is currently looping through.
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, again, it's a CTF, so it's meant to
It's
be
a
a game,
CTF, so it's supposed to be, yeah.
but at that point you go, why would you even bother sticking a password on your RSA key if you're just gonna
Pretty
have
much.
that as the password?
Yeah.
Just save yourself the pain of typing in the 8 characters.
Exactly. So now we have to, if we want to use this key, we have to change its permissions to 600. And then we can SSH in with ID RSA. So the I is the, I forget what it actually stands for, but it's the identifier.
I think it just stands for
That's
identity file.
Yeah, that's the one, identity
Yeah.
file. And that's our ID RSA key. And we are going to connect as SMB user at 192.168.123, 232.
Can you remember? Ooh. You did it. You remembered.
Yeah,
well,
that's right.
We'll see.
We try it as root and it doesn't work. So we try it as SMB user. Type in our password as password and we're in as SMB user. Nice. We're making progress. Interestingly, just coming back to this website, if we use a different word list, there is a .ssh folder which also contains the exact same file for us to download straight from here, which is another alternate path in, because there's plenty of those. Okay, now that we're in, we do a straight up lookup of, I didn't clean up after I did this the first time around. Ignore that stuff and just look at this stuff. So we've got a run me with the sticky bit running as root, which is always going to be interesting to us because we want to become root. We try running it. It just asks for some text input and then says, why are you here? Should we go through and copy it off? And do you reckon we have time to run it through Gidra and stuff?
Yeah, why not?
We'll do a quick bit of that.
I mean, there's not much to show. This
True.
was the bit when I rocked up, I casually tried to help Jake with, and we didn't really get anywhere. But it's still interesting, kind of to talk about.
So we want this one, and that's not going to go to there. It's going to go to streams CK3. That'll do. So we don't have to do anything too fancy to pull it off because we've got SSH access. So we'll just use SCP with the key file in the right place. And with this, you're copying from the left to the right. So we're copying from remote to local with our password, and it'll quickly copy over. I'm in the wrong directory. That's why it's not there. And now we've got run me locally. We can run it directly, so there's no libraries or dependencies or anything that we don't have to be able to run it. Looking at the file itself, we can see it's just a simple base 64-bit elf. And other things that we typically run against binaries just to get started is ltrace. And ltrace will give us some basic debugging stuff. So straight away we can see that it's trying to run this fgets function on whatever our user input is. And then it just puts, which is the print function, print why you here. Which is pretty simple, like it doesn't do a lot. Another tool that comes in handy with this sort of thing is running strings, which will basically look through the entire file as bytes and print anything out that is printable characters. So we can see here that it runs through a bunch of things, and it does somewhere in the code of this app try and run bin sh and bin cat home blur user.txt. And it does somewhere in the code of this app try and run bin sh and bin cat home blur user.txt. And it does somewhere in the code of this app try and run bin sh and bin cat home blur user.txt. And it does somewhere in the code of this app try and run bin sh and bin cat home blur user.txt. And it does somewhere in the code of this app try and run bin sh and bin cat home blur user.txt. And it does somewhere in the code of this app try and run bin sh and bin cat home blur user.txt. And it does somewhere in the code of this app try and run bin sh and bin cat home blur user.txt. And it does somewhere in the code of this app try and run bin sh and bin cat home blur user.txt. And it does somewhere in the code of this app try and run bin sh and bin cat home blur user.txt. And it does somewhere in the code of this app try and run bin sh and bin cat home blur user.txt. And it does somewhere in the code of this app try and run bin sh and bin cat home And it's doing all of this before it prints our "why are you here," which makes us think that maybe there's something in this app that we can enter into our user input to make it run sh, which we know will run as root, or it'll cat this file. So to figure out what it's doing under the hood, we need to decompile it and do a bit of reverse engineering stuff. And our go-to tool for that is Ghidra. Again, let Java do its thing. Close the tips. We know what we're doing. I've already created a project for this with the binary. So we just double click the binary and open it up. That's not hard to do. If you don't know how to do that, it's just file, new project.
I think we've done that in one of our other streams
before. Yeah.
Yeah.
When it first loads, you want it to analyze the file, because this will run through and give us the nice, pretty print decompiled code. Once it's done, we get all of our functions. So these are the functions that are built in within the app. A lot of sort of inbuilt libc stuff. Typically, the first place we go is our main function. And we can see here that our main function is tiny. All it does is create a 40-byte character array, a pointer variable to wrong, which is actually Ghidra's, I guess, interpreting a memory address for the function called wrong and just pretty printing it for us. fgets we can see is the function that that was taking our user input when we were using ltrace, and it's assigning. So the way the fgets works is it will take user input, take whatever integer number is in here worth of bytes from that input and dump it into this variable. So in our standard input, it's taking x28, which is int 40, and putting it into our local 38 character array. So for us, typically this is where you would find a buffer overflow. If this takes more than 40 characters, then we're going to overflow this array if we type more than 40 characters. In this case, it's handled properly. The two numbers match, so there's no overflows there. And if we type more than 40 characters in, it'll just cut off at 40 and won't break anything.
I guess the only thing that occurs to me that I didn't realize last night is, so the type of the character is just char, but then you've got code as the type of the one underneath it.
Yeah.
I
don't know C well enough to know what a
you
code
wouldn't believe how
is.
hard it would be to search for C code
Data type.
Because it just goes, the word code will show up in anything relating to C because, it's called C code or whatever. So, yeah.
I don't suppose code is a data type.
No, I just had a quick look. It wasn't obvious. Maybe Mr. Franklin knows, because I think he's done some stuff with low-level stuff.
That's all right. We'll leave that for another stream later if we actually go through and reverse this. But basically, our findings were sort of that it handles your input, so there's nothing that we could find with this fgets. It's got a hard-coded function that it calls, and then it just calls it and closes the app. Looking through the code, we can see that there is a flag function which will call that cat, the user.txt. There's also a write function, which is the one that we'll call the bin sh. And this led me to believe that we had to patch the execution flow to skip wrong and call write instead, but then Reese pointed out that the binary on the box is not writable, so we can't patch it and override it and do anything like that. So
what permissions are on it again?
I think it was just read only. Hang on, let me just SSH back into it. Hang on, I gotta go into here first. I think I typed S too many times. There we go. Yeah, so we've got read and execute.
Yeah, and same for group.
And same with
So
group, yeah. But
only
the user and group are root.
yeah. So our two
Owner and
theories were, well, actually three theories, I guess. Theory one, it's a complete rabbit hole designed to tantalize you. Theory two, and this is what I'm just randomly adding in, is that the original intent was to have maybe the next level up have the ability for you to replace or patch it. But that does change the owner, which does break stuff with, as we found out, with not capabilities, sticky bits.
Sticky bits, yeah.
And then option three was it's something we don't know about yet, like something we haven't learned.
Just thinking it through, there is NFS on this box that we didn't actually explore, and a common issue with NFS is that it keeps local permissions. So if you mount an NFS drive as root and dump a file on there as root, it'll give it root permissions on the target. So there's a possibility that that's how you're supposed to do this. But again, I didn't try it. I haven't explored it. Maybe
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That was an issue ages ago. That was an issue with Docker as well, that root in a Docker container talking out. So if you'd mounted any of the root file system, like the host file system, into the Docker container, and you'd accidentally maybe like mounted the actual root or its etc or anywhere sensitive in your container, root was also UID 0 on the host. So
yeah, okay.
anyway, we should crack on.
So cracking on, because we don't have find or locate or any of those tools that we would normally use to find other sticky bits and juicy pieces of information, I just went straight to linenum.sh because it automates all of the manual navigating around the file system looking for specific things. So that comes by default on Kali under here. So I just SCP'd it over with this command, which is again, this time it's going from local to remote and just dumping it in the user's home directory. Once it's there, we can just run it, change its permissions so it's got execute permissions, and then just run it. Let it do its thing. I'm just going to kill it there because it's already given us everything we need to know for this path anyway. So nothing, I guess, something that we did sort of know by now at least anyway, is there's a third user called blah. A bunch of different users and groups, the password file, but also the shadow file is readable by us, which is, as we may know, is normally only readable by root and contains all of the password hashes for all of the users on the box.
And the reason why the shadow file got created was, so back in the day, and this is I think back in the Unix days, you had usernames and passwords in the password file, which has the name you'd expect it to be in.
Yeah.
But you had a whole bunch of other system services and other users who needed to see that file to be able to tell what was what. And even once you had encrypted passwords in there or hashed passwords, the hashes themselves are still enough of a risk. So that was all moved to a separate file that only root, which the kernel runs as, could use to be able to verify passwords. So
yeah.
So
we steal those off the machine. We can just copy paste them, or however you want to get them off. You can copy the whole shadow file if you want. And because our VM is not super powerful, I pulled them out into my local Windows machine so that I could run Hashcat, which uses the GPU to crack them. Running this, it's going to pull them from the pot so that it doesn't absolutely kill it's going to find them in the pot and so not actually do anything. So I might run show so that it shows them. Last time I ran this on stream, it killed the stream because it killed my graphics card, and streaming runs through that. So that was always fun. Anyway, so we see it cracks all three. We've got password, which we already knew was the SMB user's password. We've got infosec, and it is easy. Looking at comparing the hashes quickly, we can see the it is easy is the blah user's password, and infosec is the root user's password. Back to our Kali machine here. Yep.
So it's good education for users if you're out there telling people to set good passwords and that a single word isn't enough. Is you on a very middling laptop, even asthmatic as it is, managed to do that stuff. It didn't take that long. So you can imagine that even like basic attempts at complexity, which tend to show up in password guest lists anyway now, won't help you that much.
Yeah, I mean, this was just the Rocky list, which I think is like 3 million lines or something. It took less than 10 minutes to crack all three of them on a not even high spec laptop. So yeah, I mean, like an actual cracking rig would get through RockU in probably seconds.
Well, my desktop will do RockU in no time at all.
Yeah. And people have like cracking stations with multiple GPUs running, not just one, and one mid-range one at that.
And so they'll use far longer lists, or Hashcat can do rainbow tables and stuff, right?
Yeah, Hashcat can do masking, it can do rainbow tables, it can do anything. So, you know, we're just using RockU because it's the standard for CTFs. But if this was a targeted attack, we could be using like a cool word list or something like that. Or if we know the password complexity requirements like you're talking about, you can create a mask of those complexity requirements, and then it'll just dynamically run through a proper brute force attack.
Metagaming the password game. I remember seeing this list where they'd boiled down most people's passwords fit. Like, it was something crazy. Like, it was less than 100 archetypes.
Yeah,
and
wow.
so you could limit, because if you think about it, blind password guessing is start at 1A and end at several million, whatever the last ASCII character is, or 30. You pick 30.
Yeah.
And then you've got pretty much everyone's password in that space, but it also takes you a lot of time to explore. So you metagame it and go, well, what are common formats? And you can just rule out a hell of a lot of possible options off the bat, which speeds you up a lot. So,
so from there, we could go straight to root, but because we are more, I guess, completionists of this, we want to see if there's another way to go from user to root. And we know that there's multiple ways from the description of this box. So we just go straight into the blah user. In their directory, we've got that user.txt, which we knew about from our Ghidra reversing stuff, and catting that out. It's just got a user flag. We can crack this hash because it's also the password. It is easy. I think they've added this because there's probably other ways to get this user without knowing their password. So this is just an MD5 of the password. It is easy. This is just the MD5 of this, in case you somehow got here without knowing the user's password. I didn't find that path, but I'm sure it probably exists. From here, we do our basic enumeration stuff again. I ran linenum as well, and also our standard sort of local enumeration stuff of running sudo-l to see if it can run anything as root or through sudo. And we can see that it can run capsh and setcap, which we knew were on this box, I guess, from the note.txt file that said that no one's ever going to know about these. Looking at the man for capsh, we can see right at the top our second argument that we can pass it is execute bash, which is always fun.
It looks like this is really only meant to be installed on systems where you're trying to figure out, because capabilities are quite powerful and quite complicated,
Oh yeah,
certainly far
yeah,
more complicated than sticky bits. So this is meant for, as you can see the description, for a handy wrapper for certain types of capability testing and environment creation. So you're trying to figure out, okay, this tool's really meant to help you come up with the correct capabilities and context and stuff. So not
yeah.
the sort of thing you'd want to leave on a box.
Yeah, and it even sort of says that it's a wrapper tool to help with capability testing. And I mean, it really shouldn't be left on a box. You can certainly use it to test your capabilities, but once you've got them all set up correctly, you should probably get rid of them. And we can look at all of the capabilities, which we've sort of run through in the past with get cap-r, which will recursively look. It's kind of like the find command. It'll recursively look from the root of the file system and just print out all of the capabilities on every file. And any file we don't have permissions to, we're just going to pipe all of our errors out to dev null. Ooh, that's not how you spell dev. So we can see there's a bunch of different files here which we have various capabilities on, but with this cap.sh, we don't even need to worry about any of that stuff, because as the manual suggested, we can just go sudo this --, and it'll open up a bash shell. And now we're root again.
Brilliant.
Nice. Now that we're root, we can cd into their home and take a poke around. There is a proof.txt, which I think is not in the same way as our Vulnhub, hack the box flags. It's got like a banner and all that kind of stuff in it. So I don't think it's a big deal if I cat the whole thing.
No, yeah.
Probably not.
In the case of Vulnhub VMs, people are only cheating themselves if they...
Well, there's nowhere to submit the flag. There's no points or system to track that kind of stuff, I guess. So, I've left it out of the write-up, but it doesn't matter for this. So we can see that we've found at least 2 different ways to root, possibly a third with the run me. Also, while we're here as root and can see everything, if we look at, say, netstat or something like that, we can see that there are a bunch of other ports running and listening on TCP6 and UDP that we haven't even begun to explore yet.
You can discount 111. It's RPC bind, right?
Oh, yeah. But things like 1337 on TCP6 is probably something that we could be interested in. It says it's running SMB, so maybe not. Oh, no, that's 445.
Oh, no, it's running YNetD.
YNetD, whatever that is, that could be a path to something. So there's heaps of UDP again. There's a bunch of different things. There's local only listening ports.
YNetD's microservices management. Okay. Micromanage your microservices with a tiny super server written in Go. Listen on the specified address for connections. When one is received, launch the specified program with arguments. Wait for the specified port to become ready for this connection on all future traffic to the new service. So it does similar to what RPC bind does.
Yeah, okay.
You connect to it and then it sends you elsewhere.
Does this even have... Oh, yeah. We can pull the IP6 address as well from probably any of the users. If we just go all the way back.
Yeah.
No. Oh, yeah, we can. Sorry. I was looking at the wrong one. So as soon as we're on the box, we can pull its IPv6, or, I wouldn't want to try and ping sweep for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's probably a few other paths that could be something interesting. There's also in /user bin, if I actually did something with it. Oh, why can't I type? We've got this non-standard binary in here called... This is another thing that enum picks up on because it scans this folder as well. We've got this escalate binary, which is a sticky bit for blur. And when you run it, it's exactly the same as... Well, I didn't actually pull it off and reverse it and everything else, but it is exactly the same as our run me, it looks like. So yeah, that's
cool.
A bunch of different potential paths, a few paths that we did work out. We got our route. That's about it, really. That's the box.
I guess that moves us on to the kind of more, what was it called again? Channel update.
Channel update, yeah.
Jeez, I feel like well, I don't really feel like much of a YouTuber when I say that. I guess so we've been doing some thinking about how we do things and what we do, and part of it's we're realizing that maybe doing a stream every week isn't as engaging as it always could be. So we're thinking about moving towards doing less streams. So still doing them and trying to keep them up for like at least once a month. And there's some early feedback that the advantage of a stream is, it's free form. We get to talk about a thought process. You get to just make dumb mistakes, which helps people sometimes just go, well, you know what? Obviously, if they're working in InfoSec, obviously I can because I'm better than them. So, that was a kind of part of our original intent, was to be informative. We saw a lot of similar things that would just skip fundamental steps and would never try and describe what was going on. But at the same time, we want to like change and grow and get better at presenting and start getting better at presenting discrete ideas and stuff that doesn't work so on the stream. Like we've tried doing streams where we talk about a project we're working on or whatever, and those, in hindsight, probably aren't actually as interesting in a stream format, and probably would do better if they were a dedicated, here is a nice punchy 5 or 10 minute long video that describes what we're doing in an informative way without it being like a 45-minute long epic where you're like, come on guys, just get to the point. So
yeah.
Looking at, in summary, probably cutting back streams to once a month, but you'll hopefully start to see soon. So I'm editing something at the moment. We'll see how it goes, but hopefully start to see
not just streams, but also some video content as well.
Yeah, edited content when we might talk about this is what this thing is, or here's how we did this, or whatever stuff that we can spend a bit more time to kind of polish up and present better, and with a lot less umming, ahhing, Reese's rants, stuff like that. So, or dedicated Reese's rants, so that way people don't have to watch it if they're not interested into it. And trying some other things. We figure, we got up to 25 subscribers, which is something. At least that's a quarter of the way to 100, and our goal was 100.
Well, you got a quarter of the way, yeah.
But let's shake it up. Let's try different things. At this point, it can't hurt. So, hopefully, this is still interesting stuff to you. But that was just an update on what we're thinking of doing. The other advantage as well is being perfectly transparent. Some weeks were harder than others because it'd be like, oh, there's nothing prepared, and I can't be bothered.
Well, that was like this. Like I did this last night as my stream prep.
Yeah, so kind of going, well, what actually might try and get us more passionate and interested again, so that, because man, it's probably no good for the watcher seeing us phone it in. So
yeah,
exactly. let's actually see what we can do. So that's kind of the overall plan, and it's a bit of relief as well because now that whole like Sunday rolls around and it's like we should probably prepare for the stream on Tuesday, and then and then we never do, and then it's Monday and we're like we should probably think about something, and then we might, or it might be just last minute on Tuesday. So
yeah.
Hopefully this all works out. Thanks for watching, guys. Jake's trying to madly update the image that's on the screen right now by redrawing a new version in Paint.
I am, yeah.
Oh, you just got it in.
Oh, except it cut itself off. It's not. It doesn't fit in properly.
I swear it's meant to be a love heart, a badly drawn love heart. It's just half of a love heart.
Well, the fill tool is blanked out for some reason. I tried to fill it in pink, but it wouldn't let me.
Oh, there we go. There we go. It showed
Yeah,
up properly now.
there we go.
Radio guys, cheers for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in and following, and we'll bring some better content soon, hopefully.
Yeah, stay safe with everything that's going on.
Exactly. See ya.
See ya.